Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Zenith Gymnastic Bodies Puerto Rico. In this series, we're going to be covering how to develop core strength, how to develop those abdominal muscles, those oblique muscles, how to fix lower back pain, and a whole other bunch of cool sciencey shit. But we're going to be focusing on this episode on specifically the abdominals and essentially the easiest way to express strength through the abdominals. Very similar to a squat, because a squat you have to bend you have to bend on the ankle, you have to bend at the knee, and then you have to bend at the hip, and then you have to stabilize with your torso. So this movement shares a lot of qualities with squats. So if there is a issue in a particular area of the body, we would tackle it the same way we would do in the squat. Are we going to work on the ankles? Are we going to work on the hamstring and the thighs? Or are we going to work on the glutes and the abdominals? So the basic movement here that I'm doing is a compression. It's called a compression. It's a variation of a crunch, but the only difference is instead of leaving my legs on the floor, I'm balancing on my bum, on my butt, on my tush. Twerk it. Anyway, so what I'm doing here is I'm closing the distance between my chest and my legs. This is the first concept that we develop, or one of the first movements that we get exposed to with core training, for good reason too. Okay? For good reason. So essentially up here in our thigh, we have some muscles that connect to our hip, and then in our spine, we have some muscles that connect our spine to our hip and to our legs. So there's a meeting point. And then but these muscles over here aren't really so important. We want to develop the six-pack muscles. Even though these will be worked as well, the fact that we'll be working on solely the compression of these muscles in this space while bringing the legs up to the hip will develop this much deeper level of musculature in the body. These are some pretty bad drawings, but essentially this is the femur. This is where the greater trochanter would be. This line over here is our spine, and it has some muscles that go into here and connect into the femur. So over here, things are going to be good because we have a spine that gives us support. The only issue I can see being created here is there being tightness in the back or the front of the legs from sitting, from prolonged episodes of chronic acute sitting. And then there's this spot right here, which usually doesn't get a lot of love, which is the front of the abdomen. So like our spine, up here in our ribs, we have a whole bunch of bones and ligaments that help give our body structure. But from here to here, there's just kind of a void. There's just this big muscle group that not only covers the front portion of our body, but it also wraps around us all the way from the bottom of our ribs to our lower back and the top of our pelvis. It keeps us all together like a sack. So when we are developing, this is a neat tidbit that it's important to know about core training. So in our peripheral body, when we don't use muscles, what occurs? They get smaller, right? And then when we work out, our muscles get bigger. Okay? So the same thing, same concept, same physics apply to our core. But something very interesting happens. When we develop our arms or our legs, they get bigger, right? When we develop our core, it doesn't get bigger. When we don't use our peripheral body, or when we don't use our arms, they get smaller. The abs do not get smaller when we don't use them. What essentially happens is when these muscles are small and weak, the weight of our internal organs push out against the wall of our abdomen, and it makes a pot belly come out. Okay, so when they get weaker, it looks like our belly is bigger, and not just bigger, but it protrudes. It comes out in like a downward-ish bouldering motion, as if something were falling out of us. Whereas if we develop our core musculature, what will occur is we will force the internal organs back inside, and that's pretty sweet, because that'll mean that your guts aren't at the risk of being lost at the supermarket or at the mall or anywhere else that you're at. But you'll also you'll notice that when you stand up straight and you look at yourself in the mirror and you assume the position that the pot belly is in, you're going to notice that there's some uncomfortable feeling in your lower back, and that's because your lower back is arching. See, for your lower back, if your lower back arches, it means that this structure is coming up to the front. Okay, so that means if you contract your abdominals, that makes your guts go in. So when people tell you that oh hey, like, don't suck that tummy in or stuff like that, they actually don't know that the contraction for the abdominals is to actually bring the guts in. It just so happens that they're so weak that the internal organs are pushing out. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on several things in this series of exercises. One of them will be like so, with compression. This is going to be the exercise that we're going to be focusing on. And then if you caught that movement that I did in the V-up, look at my hip for a moment. Look at over here. See how my hip kind of stays over here, and then my torso falls back, and then there's kind of like some wiggling in the middle. It's kind of weird. Let's go back again. No, so boom, seeing the hip stays forward and then the torso goes back. So we're going to be doing some other exercises that focus on this area right here, specifically the abdominals. This will make the V-ups look a lot better, and it'll make your midsection look a lot better. And then another thing that we're going to do is we're going to be focusing on, actually, I'm going to go back because you can actually see the lines right here. See these lines right here? Those lines are the obliques. They go from they connect to the bottom of the ribs and to the top of the pelvis. This is essentially what brings your ribs closer to your pelvis when you bend sideways, or it helps you twist around. Okay, so these are the multiple things we're going to be focusing on to have a developed midsection. Okay, so that's going to be all for this episode. Like I said, we're going to be breaking up core into a series of things to remove the possibility of being redundant and also wasting time training instead of doing other things. I think there are other things that are more important than training. You should just focus on training well and then move on to, more funner things like hand balancing or going to the beach or doing martial arts or playing on a slackline or stuff like this. So in the next episode, we're going to be covering how to work the abdominal wall, and then we're going to be covering the oblique exercises. So that'll be all for this episode, and I hope the information was of some use to you and can help you achieve greater heights in your fitness goals. Have a good one.